Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, King Clifford Jefferson, a Senator of Godfrey, the fifth Caravan Jew, the son of folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edward the Peaceful, better known as Jesus Christ, or the Vicar Christ, or Melchizedek, also known as the King of Righteousness. It is December 18th, 2024, will be equivalent to the birth year 2974. I greet you in the name of all the elders. I greet you in the name of all our predecessors, our successors, our heirs, our kindred, our family, our kinfolks. I greet you in the name of all those who have triumphed through these trying times, as well as all those who are trying to keep up their hope within this trying time, and all those who have prevailed through these trying times. I greet you in the name of our Father, i.e., King Edward the Peaceful, who is our Lord, to all prayer and to all oath and to all allegiance should go. All right. So just give me 1 second. Hmm. Second, I'll be with you guys in a second. All right. So once again, I greet you in the name of our Father, King Edward the Peaceful, to all allegiance, to all prayer is due. And there's a reason for that, because if it wasn't for the preservation of the laws of our government, i.e., the laws of God's church, the English Church of England, then we will all be in eternal doom. Okay? So once again, we want to give honor to our Lord. All that thought. All right, so we want to give honor to our king, King Edgar the Peaceful. All right? We want to give honor to him. Excuse the racket you hear in the background. That's the actual wash machine. I have no control over that. All right. So, but nonetheless, uh, let's get started with this marvelous lecture. Okay? This lecture is called The King, the Crown, the Throne. The Die is Cast. The King, the Crown, the Throne, and the Die is Cast. Okay, this is the phrase that was used by King George III at the time of the Revolution. 1 second. Let's see. We know King James used the term the die, what was it called? The die to cast uh, at the time of what we call the revolution. Okay, and that's very important because we're going to discuss that, and it all has to do with the allegiance to the crown. Okay, the allegiance to the crown. Okay, so I need everyone who's going to be paying attention to be able to ask questions in the chat if you don't understand pertaining to the lesson, as well as like, share, and subscribe, as well as hit the like button, as well as donations. If you have any, please extend them to the Third Timothy English Church of England or $ Clifford Jefferson L. As well appreciated in lieu of what we call gifts, free and common soakage. All right, but nonetheless, I'm not going to hold you long, I hope, but it's paramount that I get this lesson out to you in regards to the king, the crown, the throne, and the die is cast. The king, the crown, the throne, and the die is cast. All right. I just have to part one more time. Give me a second. I guess we'll start here. The throne. Okay, the throne. All right, the throne of England, where our ancestors who were sitting in a position as king, is very important. Greetings, Brother McGarrett from the House McGarrett. Glad you were able to join us today for this marvelous lecture. I guess I'll give it a couple of seconds and let other people get on or come on so they won't miss out. But once again, I'm glad you were able to make it. I'm just going to change my background real quick. So the people can see who they talking to, right? So the people who can see who they talking to, you're talking to one and the same. When you see King Edgar, you're talking to me. When you're talking to me, you're talking to King Edgar. Because we're one and the same. This is where your oath of allegiance should be going to, and this is where your prayer should be going to. So if you're praying to me, you're praying to him. You're praying to him, you're praying to me. You're praying to us, we're praying for you. And we're going to do this work together. All right? I am the personification of this king. It's my honor as well. I am the personification of this king, this monarch, by way of the throne. Okay? By way of the throne. That's the concept of the crown. Okay? The incarnation, the incorporation, or the personification of the king. All right? Very important that we understand that. Give a couple more seconds. Get your peanuts, popcorn, whatever you need. Once again, it's good to be in this position because it shows me my obligation and my responsibility as a result of this office that I hold to be the Prince Patriarch, the fathers of the nation, the father of my family, the father of my um society, all right, my community. So a lot of our brothers and sisters are having a hard time as a result of life itself, right? The economic downfall that we see that's surmounting at a surmounting rate. And a lot of people are going to be affected by that. Okay, this is the reason why you must understand the importance of what it is that I bring you today. All right, it ain't nothing new. It always been here. Okay, it always been here. This is why your prayer and allegiance is required. Okay, however you develop the concept of allegiance, oath of office, all right, or prayer to God to do the best that you can in lieu of that oath of office or oath of allegiance is rooted in King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, but deliver us of our debt as we forgive those who trespass against us. But lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from all evil. For thou is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I haven't said that verse in a minute, but I understand how important it is to say it, and we're going to incorporate that into, our common way of life. All right, because it's a must. All right. So with that, we want to give honor to our forefathers. All right, and give prayer for the continuance of the assistance that are given by our forefathers until we reach our goal. And when we reach that goal, we will pray together as a family. All right. So with that, let's get started with this marvelous lecture. Prayer. History of the Lord's Prayer. English. For us in English, everybody got the origin of their prayer and whatever form of prayer they have. All right. We're talking about the prayer for us as the English, i.e., the Anglo Saxon Berbers. All right. We're talking about the prayer of the English. All right. So the text of the Matthean Lord's Prayer in the King James Version of the Bible ultimately derives from the Old English translations, not considering the doxology. Only 5 words of the King James Version are later borrowing directly from the later vocage, these being depths, debtors, temptations, deliver, and amen. Early English translations, such as the Wycliffe and Old English, however, were themselves translations of the Latin Vulgate Bible. Okay? We see the different translations, Old English, Old West Saxon, all right, sprinkled down in all the particular texts, illuminated manuscripts from the 10th century, 14th century. You got Wycliffe's Bible, early modern English, William Tyndale Bible, okay, to the King James Bible. All right, and let's read it. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thou is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Greetings, Countess Middleton. Glad you were able to join us. Thank you for your donation the other day. It's well appreciated. Appreciated. Modern English. Okay, American Standard Versions, New Revised Standards, all in regards to our Lord's Prayer, based upon the origin of where our prayer come from, which is according to our English history. Okay, very important, because while the Hebrews got the origin of their Lord's Prayer, the Muslims got the origin of their Lord's Prayer, the Coptics got the origin of their Lord's Prayer. We have to take it back to the origin of where we can best understand the purpose of the Lord's Prayer and who the prayer was intended for. All these translations from the 9th century all the way up to the 18th century. Okay. All these different translations. Okay. So we're going to give me 1 second. There's something missing from here. Bear with me, just let me find it. Where is it at? Let's see if this is it. Okay, I know where it's at. All right. Lord's Prayer. All right, so we're talking about the Lord's Prayer. All right, now we're going to go to, based upon the history of our prayer in English. All right, very important. All right, so now we're going to go to the Wessex Gospel. Okay, the Wessex Gospels. We talked about this plenty of times, but I feel the need to continue to go over it. While we need to give allegiance to our ancestors, specifically King Edgar the Peaceful, as well as our prayer. Okay, our prayer. Wessex Gospel. The Wessex Gospels are known as the West Saxon Gospels, are a translation of the four Gospels of the Christian Bible into a West Saxon dialect of Old English, which is the language you see here, according to Matthew 6:9 through 13. All right, so it's a translation of the four Gospels of the Christian Bible into the Wessex dialect of Old English. All right, produced from approximately about 990 AD, Annos Dominius, in the year of our Lord. In England, this version is the first translation of all four Gospels into a standalone Old English text. Seven manuscript copies survived, and transcribing was supervised by the monk of Elfric of Isham. Once again, Elfric of Isham. Okay, we must understand that. Elfric of Isham was the first compilation of the four Gospels. Okay, the four Gospels. Let's see. All right. Now, who was Elfric of Ipswich? Just to give you an idea who he was. He was at the Benedictine monastery. Okay. He was a part of the Benedictine monastery through the English Reformation that was done through who? King Edgar the Peaceful, our Jesus Christ. All right. Elfric of Isham was an English abbot and a student of Ethelwood of Winchester and a consummate prolific writer of Old English, of hagiography, homilies, biblical, and commentary, and other genres. He is also known variously as Alfric of Grammarian, Alfricus of Grammaticus, and Alfric of Cerne, or Alfric of Homilus. In the view of Peter Hunter Blair, he was a man of comparable both in quality of his writing and the quality of his mind, even in Bede himself. According to Claudio Leonardi, he represents the highest pinnacle of the Benedictine reform of Anglo-Saxon literature. Do everyone understand that? So I'm taking you right to the source of our Lord's Prayer. Elfric was an education in the Benedictine Old Ministers, Winchester, under St. Ethelwood, who was bishop there from 964 to 984. Ethelwood had carried on the tradition of Dunstan, all right, in his government of Abbey of Abington, then in Berkshire. And at Winchester, he continued his strenuous support for the English Benedictine reform. He seems to have actually taken part in teaching activities of the Abbey. So Elfric of Isham, the one responsible for the Wessex Gospels as well as other books, were a part of the old Ministers Abbey as well as the new Ministers Abbey, and there was a new Ministers Charter given and new ministers by King Edgar the Peaceful called New Ministers Charter. Okay, which we're going to talk about that real quick before I go into my lesson. English Benedictine Reform. What's that? The English Benedictine Reform or Monastic Reform of the English Church. You hear that, everybody? The English Church. So we are called the third type of English Church of England, reformed from the English Church of England as a result what was done by the House of Stuarts and the House of Tudors, which we'll talk about in a second. Hold that thought. Okay, so as you can see, the English Benedictine Reform is associated with what? The English Church. Okay? The English Church is also associated with the crown. In the 7th and 8th century England, most monasteries were Benedictine. But in the 9th century, learning and monasticism declined severely. Alfred the Great deplored the decline and started to reverse it. The court of Ashburton, the first king of whole of England, was a cosmopolitan. And future reformers such as Dunstan and Ethelwood learned from continental exponents of the Benedictine monasticism. The English movement became dominant under King Edgar, i.e., the father of Ethelred the Unready, the father of Edward the Confessor, okay? The last Berber king before William the Conqueror invaded England. Let's prove it. Okay, the English movement became dominant under King Edgar, our Jesus Christ, who supported the exposure of secular clergy, i.e., Roman Catholic priests, clerks, uh, 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 popes, whoever there is, if they're Roman Catholic, they were not a part of the English society or intellectual movement, cosmopolitan movement, as well as the reformation of the church. They were excluded from that. Okay, so the English movement became dominant under King Edgar, who supported the expulsion of secular clergy from the monasteries and cathedral chapters and their replacement by monks. The reformers had close relations with what everyone said, the crown, furthering its interest and depending on it for support. Okay? We must comprehend that. All right? We also go into what we call New Ministers Charter. Okay? New Ministers Charter. Let me see if that pops up right here. Let's talk about that real quick. Newminster charted an Anglo-Saxon illuminated manuscript that was likely composed by Bishop of Ethelwood, presented to the new ministers in Winchester by King Edgar in the year 966 A.D., Annus Dominius, in the year of your Lord, now reincarnated in me, I personify. To commemorate the Benedictine reform, it's now part of the British Library and its collections. Approximately 963, Bishop Ethelwood of Winchester required the monks of new ministers under threat of eviction to adopt Benedictine rule. The decision was made with the approval of King Edgar, who reigned in England from 959 until his death in 975. The charter was officially created as the Codex to compile and present the royal grant which establishes the new laws of the new minister later to become Hyde Abbey. Now, notice in 1 BC, under the Gregorian calendar, the year is actually 950, uh, 950 AD. When you get to 1 AD, the year is actually 951 AD, Annus Dominius. So King Edgar didn't become king until 995, 959, but yet he's in his growing stage or in his ministry. Okay. All right, so it's very important to understand that in 1 BC, under the Gregorian year, is actually in the Berber year, 950 BC, which we'll go to in a second, to let you know that King Edgar himself was also a Berber because there was not an English reading out year until 1066. All right, Edward the Confessor died in 1066. William Conqueror invaded in 1066. Prior to him, there was only Berber kings. All right. It is one of the 34 surviving documents from the pre-conquest archives of the new ministers and stands out as an authentic document among numerous forgeries of its time. You hear that? It's authentic. The text consists of 22 short chapters which outline the creation and fall of both angels and man and also articulates Edgar's desire to do the will of God. It additionally explains why Edgar made the change from secular cleric to Benedictine monks and reference the relationship between the king, the abbey as a cycle of protection from spiritual and physical threats. There are unknown number of missing leaves from the manuscript, the content of which can be merely be speculated. Style. Although the use of gold lettering was uncommon in England, every page of New Minister's Charter is written in gold, making it one of a kind. Greetings, brother, different from the house of different. Well, I know that's not your last name. Please change it to your proper name so I may respond to you properly. Although the use of gold lettering was uncommon in England, every page of the New Minister's Charter is written in gold, making it one of a kind. The insular style of lettering is present in the Charter, which is written mainly in the round style of Anglo-Caroline script, with large capital letters marking the beginning of different sections of text. Aside from these style letters, the majority of the written pages have no other type of illumination. The only true exception are four found near the beginning of the Charter. One page presents the name of King Edgar with blue, white, and gold borders. The king's name, presented as Edgar Rex, is written in square capitals with the remainder of the page written in Unicodes. The fiction page contains a large chiro as referred to as the Chrisma. Everybody know what the chiro is, right? Chiro is one of the earliest forms of Christogram, forming by the superimposed in the first two capitals, letter chi and rho. Okay? Very important you understand that importance of the chiro. Decorated in green and gold and also framed in gold. The text of the page is written entirely in square capitals. Preceding these pages is an elaborate front piece, the only fully illuminated page of the charter. Also noteworthy are the crosses adorning the witness list, some filled with gold and others merely outlined in brown or red. The significance of the different styles of crosses is speculated to correlate somehow the importance of each witness, but is not entirely known. Another stylistic feature that was unusual for its time is the presence of 10 rhyming sentences of prose in chapter 2. Okay, brother Gavin Different. Give me 1 second. Okay. So we're talking about the new minister's charter under the new ministers, which is under the auspices of the Benedictine Reform done by our Lord Jesus Christ. All right, the one you see on my right. Okay, I am Him, and He is me. We are one. Okay, so we understand that He continued the English Church of England, now known as the Temple Church, Third Temple English Church of England, as well as he had affiliated with the Crown because he represented the Crown. Okay, he represented the Crown. All right, very, very important. Greetings, Brother Cunningham from the House of Cunningham. Glad you were able to join us today. We're talking about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, which is King Edgar the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of today. And we're talking about the English Church of England, which he reformed as a result of invasions internally as well as externally, as well as it was done under his auspices representing the crown, okay, which I'm doing today. All right. So unfortunately, you weren't able to see the beginning of this lesson, but nonetheless, we can continue on with the continuance of what I have prepared for you all today. All right. So we're talking about King Edgar the Peaceful, which I am the reincarnation of. He represents the English Church of England, now known as the Third Temple English Church of England, as well as the representation of the crown. Okay. This is what we're going to discuss today because the topic of the lesson is the king, the crown, the throne, the die and cast. Once again, the king, the crown, the throne, the die and cast. We would discuss every breakdown relevant to this fact. So, King Edgar was born in 943 and died in 975. He became king in 959. Okay, he became king in 959. We must understand that. Let's see it right here. Right here. The English movement became dominant under King Edgar in 959. This is when he became king. All right. I'm sorry for the interruption. Hold on. All right. So we see all the kings of Wessex from Alfred the Great to Acerton to Edward the Elder to Edred to King Edward the Peaceful to Edward the Unready to uh, Edward the Confessor. All these were kings of Wessex. All right, they were Berber kings. You didn't get an English freedom now year till the year 1066. Prior to that year, the only kings ruling in the territory now called United Kingdom was Berbers. All right, we're going to prove it. All right. apparently they had a government functioning at this particular time, and the government was under the rule of the church. Okay, not a separation of church, but a fusion of church and state. Okay, we must understand that. That is what we need to go back to. This was done. Okay, all right, by the necessity which is justified through our state of emergency, i.e., our declaration of state of necessity. All right. So please, everyone, please pay very close attention. (1911) Encyclopedia Britannica. Let's start there. (1911) Encyclopedia Britannica concerning Berbers. Okay, concerning specifically Berbers. Okay, we are Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Okay. Okay. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, it clearly states the fact has been emphasized by Dr. R.T. Latham, who writes, all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco, all that is not Arabic in French provinces of Algeria, okay? And all that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fezan is Berber, okay? The explanation lies in a profound distinction of character. The Arab is a herdsman and a nomad. The Berber is an agriculturist and a townsman. The Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a democrat with his Jimna or Wittenmont, or his Qanun or unwritten code, the Magna Carta of the individual liberties as opposed to the community's good. Okay? So the Berber government was called Wittenmont, and their unwritten code was called that of the Magna Carta. This point we must understand, my brothers and sisters. It also stated that uh, uh, all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco, all that is not Arabic in the French province of Algeria, and all that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fezan is Berber. So you're talking about two distinct groups of people, okay? Arabs and Berbers, all right? And they gave you several territories, but the main territory that I'm concerned with right now is based upon proving that the Anglo-Saxon Berbers were in fact the Plantagenet kings because Edward I had a crusade in Tripoli. Okay, crusade in Tripoli as a result of the Arab invasion in Tripoli, which qualifies that Edward I, son of Henry III, son of John, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, was in fact a Berber. Let's prove it. Many of you don't know this. All under the English Parliament, our government, Witten, Wittenmont. All right, our government. Everybody like this? Please give me a thumbs up. Lord Edward's crusade. He's way the hell over here in what we call Jerusalem, Tripoli. All right, look at it. Operation Lord Edward's Crusade against the Mamelukes and Crusaders. Okay? We know Godfrey the Fifth Caliban Jew, father was Folk the Fifth, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay? Edward the First was the descendant of Godfrey, the son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. So it's only right if Godfrey the Fifth Caliban Jew, son of Folk, who built castles in Jerusalem, that means that this land and territory or landmass was also associated with England. Okay? England. All right? So we see that Edward's the Crusade was in what we call Tripoli. All right? Tripoli. Lord Edward's Crusade, sometimes called the Ninth Crusade, was a military expedition to the Holy Land under the command of Edward, Duke of Gascony, later King Edward, later King as Edward I. You hear that? Edward, Duke of Gascony. Edward I, son of Henry III of the Plantagenet crown. Our family, my brothers and sisters. You can't disqualify this. Your king know his stuff. All right? I'm taking all the way back there. Okay? Let's read a little bit about it. Look at the belligerents. Mamelukes and the Sultans versus the Kingdom of England, County of Luxembourg, Sicily and Armenia, Kingdom of Cyrus, Kingdom of Jerusalem, Antioch. You hear that? See, we were all family. All right? Come on. You can't make this up, brothers and sisters. You can't make it up. So Edward I was assisting his brothers and sisters over in Jerusalem, and they were Berbers, okay? They were Berbers. All right, we must understand that. Versus Arabs. They just made the distinction in the encyclopedia that they were Berbers, okay? Their government was called Wittemont or Witten, known as the White Council. Edward and his brother Edmund prepared an expedition to join Louis at Tunis, but it was delayed several times in the summer of 1270 because their father, King Henry III of England, could not make up his mind whether to join it or not. On the advice of his counselors, he opted to stay in England, and Crusaders embarked at Dover on the 20th of August. Unusual for that time, they were accompanied by Edward's wife, who? Eleanor Castile, daughter of Ferdinand III, the King of Castile, of what we call the Spanish Empire, all right, prior to the Roman Catholics under Isabella of Castile. Isabella the First was his name. Isabella the First of Castile. She was a Roman Catholic that came pre-conquest through the age of discovery. Prior to that, the Spanish and French houses were aligned with the French and English houses. Okay, we must comprehend. All right. So as we can see, there was a crusade, now i.e. the Ninth Crusade in Tunis, as well as Tripoli by Edward I, who was married to Eleanor of Castile, who was a Spanish queen. All right. You must understand this history. All right, let's go back. Let's go to the calendar now. One BC. The year 1 BC means the Berber calendar, or before Christ, because Christ don't show up till AD, Annos Dominios. Okay? Annos Dominios. We know that Christianity, or the form of Christianity that people practice now, is from the Roman Catholic Church, and we know the Roman Catholic Church was created from Rome. Rome goes back to 753 BC with the founding of Romulus and Remus. And we know at that time we was well into what we call the 25th dynasty of the ancient Nubians, of what we call the ancient Kushites, which were actually Berbers. Okay? All right? 1 BC. The Berber year is 950. King Edgar, our Jesus Christ, didn't become king until 959. And in the Hebrew calendar, you see the year was 3761. That's the beginning of the world, according to the Hebrew calendar. But yet these gods is here on earth. All right. These gods are here on earth known as Berbers. All right. Because you see the Berber year 950. All right. There is no English reading out year here. Okay. You don't get an English reading out year till 1066. Prior to 1066, the only Berber kings you see in England was Edward the Confessor. Let's hit Edward the Confessor. And Edward the Confessor was the grandson of our Jesus Christ, who I'm the reincarnation of. Edward the Confessor was the Anglo-Saxon English king and saint. So that means he was not only a saint, he was an angel, because angels were saints. All right? We know the opposite of a saint is a demon, okay? Usually considered the last king of the House of Wessex, who ruled from 1042 till 1066. You hear that? 1066, this was the invasion of William the Conqueror, and what we call the Norman Conquest. All right? Let's look at the all right, so Edward the Confessor, father was Ethelred the Unready, whose father was Jesus Christ. All right? The person right here who looks exactly like me. Okay? We must understand that. All right? So, all the kings from Alfred the Great all the way up to King Edgar the Peaceful were a part of the reformation of the English church, which has been done by me in its present day by reforming it to the Third Typical English Church of England from the English Church of England as a result of what was done as the revolt from the English monarchs during the times of what we call the House of Tudors and the House of Stuarts, which we'll be talking about in a second. Okay? Very, very, very important. So let's go back to the original government of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, which was called Wittenmont. Okay, according to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, not to according to what we say, according to the encyclopedia. Let's go back there, and we know that when we associate that government, we associate it with the Berber government because Edward I, descended from the kings of Wessex, had a crusade over in Jerusalem, and that wasn't even Berber territory. That was the territory associated with the so-called people who call themselves the Jews. Greetings, Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont. Glad you were able to join us. Okay, so let's look at Wittenmont. Wittenmont. We're going to trace it all the way back and going to see how the names changed. Now it's called New Jersey Provincial Council. All right? Back in the medieval days or the ancient days, time we forget, it was called Witten, which means wise man, which was the king of councils and the Anglo-Saxon government of England from about the 7th century until 11th century, and comprised of important noblemen, including aldermen, thegns, and bishops. Meetings of white Wittens were sometimes called the Wittenmont. Okay? It was called the Wittenmont. Witten or Wittenmont. Prior to that, after that, when it was invaded by William the Conqueror, it became what's known as what we call the Curia Regis. Its primary function was to advise the kings on legislation, judicial cases, land transfer, and other matters of national importance. The Witten may have elected new kings from among members of the ruling dynasty. After the Norman Conquest in 1066, those roles were performed by similar councils known as the Curia Regis. Okay? The Curia Regis. All right, we must understand this, brothers and sisters. The Witten is considered the ancestors of the Parliament of England. You hear that? So the Witten preceded what we call the Parliament of England, okay? Which now we call the New Jersey Provincial Council. All right, not the Parliament of Great Britain, all right, but the Parliament of England, totally distinct. The Wittens considered the ancestors of the Parliament of England before the 20th century. Historians thought it had been proto-parliament institution that were both democratic and representative. Didn't the 1911 encyclopedia says that the Berber government was democratic? Called Wittenmont. Let's prove it. And the 20th century historians shifted the emphasis on Witten ad hoc, essentially a royal nature. Okay? We know Wittemont means wise men, also called Wittemont, and it was a part of what we call the Parliament of England. And it said that they had what they called a democracy before you had what they call a republic. Let's go back and reference the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica again before we move forward. So those who haven't seen it before will see what it is that we're talking about. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a democratic with his Jimna o Wittemont and his Qanun unwritten code, the Magna Carta, of the individual liberties as opposed to the community's good. Okay? So we see that the Berbers government was a democratic, not a republic. Okay? Their government was that of wise counsel before the invasion of William the Conqueror in 1066. Why is this important? Let's pull up the year 1066. The year 1066. AD. Europe. September 12th, William Duke of Normandy assembles a fleet at St. Valley-sur-Somme in readiness for an invasion of England. The first English read now year. Every king underneath him were English kings. All the kings prior to that were Berber kings. Please tell me everybody sees this. If you do, please give me a thumbs up in the chat line. Okay? Please tell me everybody sees this. If you do, give me a thumbs up in the chat line. Not before you see the year 1065, the year before that. The year 1065, there is no English read now year. Okay? As we can see here. And we see Edward the Confessor is consecrated in Westminster Abbey. Okay? He was a Berber because there is no English read now year. Okay? There is no English read now year, but yet there is a Berber year. Okay? And we know that when you go back from 1066 and go back to 1 BC, which we'll go now, in 1 BC, you still got a Berber calendar and you don't have an English read now year. And the Berber year is 950, and we know 950, King Edgar Al Jesus Christ is about to be crowned king. All right? We know this is the time of the estimated time of the birth of Jesus. Okay? Jesus is actually King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay? The Vicar of Christ. We must understand that. All right? And why is 1 BC in the Berber calendar, okay, which is in the Berber year is 950, because we know the Gregorian calendar is what they got here. Gregorian calendar didn't come until 1582 with Pope Gregory the 13th, who then sent it down from Pope Gregory the First, which comes in with the Gregorian mission by Pope Gregory the First to have all the Anglo-Saxons converted to Roman Catholic Christianity, contrast to the Christianity that we practice, okay? Jacob Ojala, your answer, you said nope. What do you mean by nope? Please respond before I move forward. If you don't see it, let's show you back. Let's make sure you see it. All right, 1066, Mr. Jacob Ojala. I'm only going to show you this one more time. The year 1066 AD, Annos Dominios. We know that the Gregorian calendar was not created till 1582 by Pope Gregory the 13th. I'm gonna just explain this to him because he might not caught that, Archbishop. So I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. We know that the Gregorian calendar was not created till 1582. Okay, but yet they got a Gregorian calendar in 1066. Okay, the Gregorian calendar was created by Pope Gregory XIII till 1582, but yet there is a Gregorian calendar in 1066. All right, and we know in 1066 that's when William the Conqueror invaded England, because it shows that William the Conqueror is the first English king to invade England, and every king. Okay, yeah, well, block him, Archbishop. I can see he don't want to be taught. I'm gonna move forward. All right. You tripping, brother. All right. Let's see. All right. 1066. Let's go back to 1 BC. So 1 BC, you see, means before Christ. AD means Annus Dominios. So in the year 950 AD, why the so-called person, i.e., this Jacob, whoever you say he was, his his world is not even in existence right now. 3761, this is when the world is being created for him and everybody who believe in this type of Christianity. Where we see Edward the Confessor in 1066 was considered a saint. Okay? He was a saint in 1066. All right? Everybody see that. Edward the Confessor was a saint, not a demon, not a devil, but a saint. Okay? Not according to the Roman Catholic Church, but according to the English Church, Edward the Confessor was a saint. All right, where's he at again? England and Scotland. Edward the Confessor died after 24-year reign of London. The Wittemont or Witten proclaimed Harold Godwinson king of England. So Berber kings, my brothers and sisters, Berber kings, Wittemont or Witten proclaimed Harold Godwinson king of England. This comes in when we were invaded. Okay, invasion, my brothers and sisters. All right, let's bring it on home. All right, let's bring it on home. I want to touch on one more thing. 1 BC. In 1 BC, the year is 950. Okay? All right? So we understand that Rome was not even in the picture in 950. After this, I'll move forward. Rome was not even in the picture in 950, nor is William the Conqueror or any of his descendants are in existence. The only people that are in existence is Berbers. And we know at this time, Jesus must have been a Berber, because the only people existing at this time is Berber kings, okay? According to religion, all right? And we're talking about the English religion, all right? And we know that these ancient Cushites were the same people, all right? Because if we go to 753 BC, right now, under the Berber calendar, all right? If we go there and see the corresponding calendars, okay? 753 BC, we'll see right here on top is the Romulus and Remus legendary found the city of Rome. Okay, so they're not even in existence when the Berbers are already doing their thing. Okay, we must understand that they're not even in existence when the Berbers are doing their thing here on this planet Earth. Okay, we are well into our 23rd dynasty of Egypt. Okay, which clearly says that the 23rd dynasty was an ancient misnomered Egyptian dynasty of ancient Libyan, okay? Of ancient Libyans, okay? So we can put that to bed, all right? Let's move forward. Wittenmont, going back to it. Anglo-Saxon Berber government. Wittemont was the government of the Anglo-Saxons from the 7th century to the 11th century that were comprised of families, noblemen, aldermen, thegns, and bishops, okay? It wasn't until the Norman conquest that it changed to what they called the Curia Regis, all right? And we know that even under the Curia Regis, our Witten government was now changed from Witten government to the Parliament of England after the Curia Regis. So it went from Witten to Curia Regis to the Parliament of England. Okay, once again, from Britain to the Created Regions to the Parliament of England. We're gonna make sure that y'all understand that before this lesson is over. So let's do it now. Okay, Created Regions. The Created Regions, Latin for the World Council. Council. Key point. Council. Or the King's Court. Key point. King's Court. Councils are of the King's Court. All right. So you got Britain, Created Regions, Parliament of England, King's Court, then what we call New Jersey Provincial Council, which was the King's Council. All right. We must understand that they're synonymous. The Created Regions, Latin for World Council or King's Court, was name given to councils of advisors of administrators in the medieval Europe who served the kings, including the kings of France, Norman kings of England, Sicily kings of Poland, and kings of Scotland. You hear that? After the Norman conquest of 1066, the central governing body of the Kingdom of England was called now the Created Regions. Before the conquest, the Anglo-Saxon called this body Britain. I just said that. And English writers continue to use the term as well. It corresponds to the Placitum Generale of the Frankish kingdom, and this name was also applied to the English Created Regions. It was similar to, but not the same as, the Created Ducas, which served the Dukes of Normandy. Members, particularly the king's household knights, were also known as the Created Regions. So you see the difference between the Witten or Wittemont, which was of the Berbers before they were invaded by William the Conqueror, i.e., and all those who came after him, and which instituted what we call the Created Regions, which caused for rights for the Plantagenet kings to marry into the Wessex family to now take over to what they now going on, or what it's going to be called the Parliament of England. All right. How I know it? Let's just prove it. All right. Let's move to the next one. Parliament of England. Now we're gonna have to really investigate this one because it went from Britain to the Created Regions to what we call the Parliament of England. Okay, from Britain to the Created Regions when William the Conqueror invaded to the Parliament of England. Okay, and the Parliament of England lasted from the 13th to the 17th century. Okay, from the 13th to the 17th century. Okay, we know that the Parliament involved the king, all right, and his council. Very, very important. Let's just look in the box. History. Established in 1236, disbanded in 1707, preceded by the Created Regions and succeeded by the Parliament of Great Britain. So the Parliament of Great Britain is not the same as the Parliament of England, and the Parliament of England is not the same as the Created Regions, and the Created Regions is not the same as what we call Britain. Okay? Very important because they're seated by different councils. We must understand this. All right? We must understand this. Does everybody understand that? Please give me a thumbs up in the chat. Parliament of England was a legislator of the Kingdom of England, all right, going back to 927 from the 13th century until 1707, because we know we went from Britain to the Created Regions to the Parliament of England, all right? Parliament evolved from the great councils of bishops and peers that advised the English monarch. It didn't say Scottish monarchs. It didn't say Irish monarchs. It didn't say French monarchs. It didn't say Spanish monarchs. It said English monarchs. Great councils were first called parliaments during the reign of who? Henry III, son of Henry II, son of John, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem. So the first parliament was called by who? Henry III. son of John, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey the fifth kind of man Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay? We must comprehend the language. Let's look at it. Predecessors. All right? Predecessors. Since the unification of England in the 10th century, kings and convened national councils of lay magnates and leading churchmen. The Anglo-Saxon called such council as Witan. These councils were an important way for kings to maintain ties with powerful men in distant regions of the country. The Witan had a role in making a promulgated legislation as well as making decisions concerning war and peace. They were also venues for state trials such as the trial of Earl Godwinson, a Danish Viking who came in as a result of Danish conversions. Okay, we must understand this. After the Norman conquest in 1066, the king received royal councils from the members of a new council called the Curia Regis, means the royal court or the king's court or the king's council. Okay, to discuss national business and promulgate legislation, such as the Doomsday Survey was planned at the Christmas Council of 1085. The Constitution of Clarendon was made at 1164. That was passed by the what? The Plantagenet kings, all right, which where you get the assize courts, all right? We must understand our government, all right? The members of this great council called the Parliament of England were composed of kings, tenants, and chiefs, archbishops, bishops, abbots, earls, barons, and were summoned by individual writs, by lesser tenants who were summoned by sheriffs, okay? We must understand what's going on. Let's move forward. This is the Parliament of England. All right, the Parliament of England. It was established by Henry III, and Henry III was the son of John, the son of Henry II, the son of Godfrey the fifth kind of man Jew. The year between 1189 and 1215 were a time of transition for the Great Council. The cause of the transition was new financial burdens imposed by the crown. You hear that? To finance the Third Crusade. Not the first, not the second, not the third, not the first, not the second, not the ninth, not the 10th. All right, we know Edward the First was in the Ninth Crusade, Louis the Ninth was in the 10th Crusade, but we talking about the third, dealing with Richard the First, where we get the concept of what we call time immemorial, and paid for the series of Anglo-French wars fought between who? The Plantagenet and the Capetine dynasty. Did you hear that, brother? In 1188, a precedent was established when the Great Council granted Henry II, son of Godfrey the fifth kind of man, to son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, the Saladin tithe. In granting this tax, the Great Council was acting as representative for all taxpayers. You hear that, brothers and sisters? Do you hear that? Let's move a little further. King John. King John alienated the barons by his partiality and dispensing justice, heavy financial demand for abusing his rights to feudal incidents, relief, and aid. In 1215, the barons forced John to abide by a charter of liberty similar to the charter issued by the early kings, see Charter of Liberty, known as the Magna Carta. Okay, now we just read in the 1911 Encyclopedia that the uncoded Magna Carta was the code of the Berbers. Didn't they say that? Now we got a written code called the Magna Carta, which is still the code of the Berbers. Okay, we are what our forefathers were without doubt or contradiction. Okay? Let's move forward. Now we get to the 13th century. Very, very important, my brothers and sisters. Why? Because in the 13th century, you get into the descendants of who? Henry III, Edward I, Edward II, Edward III, John gone. This gets into what we call the conflict between the internal affairs of the house who would inherit the English throne. Okay? We must comprehend this, brothers and sisters. Let's look at it. This is where we had a lot of conflict. 13th, 14th century. Okay? The 13th, 14th century. We know Parliament was established by who? Henry III. And they were actually taking off what was there prior to Henry III, was based upon his father, Henry II, son of John, his father, John, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey the fifth kind of man Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. So we see from the 10th century to the 11th to the 14th century, there's conflicts taking place. Why? Let's see. Edward the First, very important. Edward the First is son of Henry the Third. Henry the Third is son of Henry the Second. I mean, son of John. John's the son of Henry the Second, son of Godfrey the Fifth, Caliban Jew. All of these people are family. Okay, we find Edward the First not just in statute here in what we call North America, but in case law here in North America. And in the case law here in North America, it also talks about you having the ability to inherit estates here in North America, but it also establishes how your citizenship should be determined once you are emancipated by way of being put in slavery by those of the Scottish monarchs who were not English monarchs. But we didn't have the unification of England and Scotland till the Act of 1707. Prior to that, all those English kings from 1065 on down were Berbers. We know you didn't get English kings till 1066, starting with William the Conqueror, and everybody took their cue from who? William the Conqueror. Okay? Edward the First. Edward the First learned from the failures of his father's reign, the usefulness of Parliament for building consensus and strengthening their royal authority. Parliaments were held regularly throughout his reign, generally twice a year at Easter and the spring of the Michael's Mass in the autumn. Okay, all these were commemorative ceremonials that had to do with the mass, the people. Okay, on the average, the first major statutes amending the common law were promulgated by who? The Parliament of England. Okay? The Parliament of England, including the Statute Quae Imperatores and the Statute Cor Warranto, which means a order to show cause. Okay? To order to show cause why you change intel estate to fee simple through subinfeudation, which was a violation of Quae Imperatores. Okay? Quae Imperatores said you couldn't subinfeudate land, you had to substitute land to that which was subject to the original tenant in chief, which got the original grant from the landlord by the Lord Paramount, which means the king. Okay? So the statute was passed by who? Edward the First of the Plantagenet King. Let's look at that real quick before I move forward. Okay? The Statute of Westminster, also known as the Statute of Westminster the First, codified the existing laws of England into 51 chapters. Chapter 5, which mandates free elections and is still enforced in the United Kingdom to this present day. William Stubbs gives a summary of the statute. Okay? This act is almost a code by itself. It contains 51 clauses and covers the whole ground of legislation. In language now recalls that Canute or Alfred now anticipate that of our own day. On the one hand, common right is to be done to all, as well poor as rich, without respect of persons. On the other hand, elections are to be free, and no man is by force, malice, or menace to disturb them. The spirit of the Great Charter is not less discernible. Excessive immersements, abusive of worship, irregular demands for feudal age are forbidden. And the same words are by amending enactments. The inquest system of Henry II of England, the law of rec, and the institution of coroners, measures of Richard I, his ministers, come under review, as well as the provisions of Oxford and the statutes of Marlborough. We know Henry II, the son of Godfrey, the fifth Caliban Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay? And his laws go back to who? Alfred the Great, before they were invaded by Canute the Great, a Danish king. Okay? We must comprehend that. That's the statute of Westminster. What is the statute of Gloucester? Let's look at that real quick. Statute of Gloucester is a piece of legislation enacted by Parliament England during the reign of Edward I. The statute was proclaimed at Gloucester in August 1278 was crucial to the development of English law. The Statute of Gloucester and the ensuing legal hearings were a means by which Edward I tried to recover regal authority that had been alienated during the reign of his father Henry III, who had been made a virtual to a baronial party led by Simon de Montfort. Edward recognized the need for the legal reform and considered Parliament as a means by buying popular support by encouraging loyal subjects to petition the king against his own barons and ministers. Now remember, Scotland, the unification of England and Scotland didn't start till 1707. Okay, prior to that, the crown was here. Okay, in New Jersey, we're going to talk about that. But one thing I want you to realize that Scottish kings were expelled from England, okay, in 1295 through the Edict of Expulsion, okay? So how are they all of a sudden posing as kings in England again when they were expelled from England? That lets you know that they got some assistance, and that was through what we call the House of Tudors, which is who took over our parliament, okay, which we're going to talk about in a second, all right? So that's the Statute of Gloucester. Let's also look at the Statutes of Mortimer. All passed by Edward I. All these things are important, my brothers and sisters. Statutes of Mortimer. Statutes of Mortimer were two enactments passed in the reign of Edward I, aiming at preserving the kingdom's revenues by preventing land from passing into possession of the church, the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? Possession of property by a corporation such as the church was known as mortmain, meaning literally dead hand. In medieval England, feudal estates generally generated taxes for the king known as feudal incidents, i.e., common soakage, principally on the grant or inheritance of the estate. If an estate became owned by a religious corporation which could never die, could never attain majority, and could never be attained for treason, these taxes never became payable. It was akin to a state being owned by a dead, hence the term. Dead pledge. Statutes of mortmain. Okay? The Statute of Mortmain were meant to reestablish the prohibition against donating lands to the church for the purpose of avoiding feudal services, a prohibition which had originated in the Magna Carta in 1215 and was specifically defined in 1217's issue. But King John, the original signatory of the Magna Carta, died, and the following year, his son Henry III did not enforce the proscription, and to the contrary, showed a great deference to the church. Henry the son Edward I desired to reestablish the precedent set by 1215 and 1217, issued by the Magna Carta. Okay, all right. He also passed what we call the Statutes of Queen Imperatoris. All right, Statute of Westminster's, Statutes of Queen Imperatoris, Corwanto, all statutes incorporated in what we call New Jersey's modern day statutes, which I went through previous lectures, but I'm not going to have the time to go through them to today. All right. Let's move forward. Okay. Edward I. This is Parliament. Okay. All this trying to preserve our kingdom as a result of the conflict that's happening eternally that started what we call the war, the 100-Year War. Okay. The 100-Year War. All right. We know Edward I was the father of Edward II. Edward II was the father of Edward III. Okay. Edward III was the father of John Gaunt. Okay. We must follow the rabbit hole. Right here. In 1341, the Commons met separately from the nobility and clergy for the first time, creating what was effectively an upper chamber and lower chamber, with the knights and burgesses sitting in the latter. The upper chamber became known as the House of Lords from 1544 onward, and the lower chamber became known as the House of Commons, collectively known as the House of Parliament. Everyone understands that? The authority of Parliament grew under Edward III. It was established that no law could be made, nor any levy, nor any tax levy, without the consent of both houses and the sovereign, i.e., the crown, i.e., the monarch, i.e., the king, i.e., the corporation. So, this development occurred during the reign of Edward III because he was involved in the 100-Year War and needed finances. During his conduct of the war, Edward tried to circumvent Parliament as much as possible, which caused his power structure to emerge. So at this time, there's an eternal conflict with the 100-Year War between the Yorks and the Lancasters. Okay, the Yorks and the Lancasters, which are cadet branches of the Plantagenet crown. Okay, tell me how I know this, because I studied. Okay. Now we get into the 15th century. All right. The period saw the introduction of franchise with limited the number of people who could vote in elections to the House of Commons, not the House of Lords, but the House of Commons. Matter of fact, let's go to the next paragraph. All right, let's go there. Tudor era. During the reign of the Tudor monarch, it often argued that the modern structure of English Parliament began to be created. Tudor monarchy, according to historian J.A. Nils, was powerful, and there were often periods of several years when Parliament did not sit at all. However, the Tudor monarchs realized that they needed Parliament to legitimize many of their decisions. You hear that? They needed Parliament to legitimize their decisions. By the time of the Tudor monarch Henry VII's 1485 coronation, the monarch was not a member of either. You hear this? By the time of the Tudor monarch Henry VII, founder of the House of Tudors, coronation, the monarch was not a member of either the upper house or lower chamber. Consequently, the monarch would have to make his or her feelings known to the Parliament through his or her supporters in both houses proceeding, which regulated by the presiding officers in either chamber. Did you hear that? So the House of Tudors were not actually a part, or the House of Tudors were not a part or members of the lower house or the upper house. Did y'all hear that? All right. And as a result of that comes the conflict. Rebellion and revolution. Parliament had not always submitted to the wishes of the Tudors monarch, but parliamentary criticism of the monarch reached new levels in the 17th century. When the last Tudor monarch, Elizabeth I, died in 1603, King James VI of Scotland, not England, came to power as King James I, founding the Stuart monarchy. Okay, they founded a Stuart monarchy as Scottish kings, but they were not English kings. Why? Because you didn't have a unification of England and Scotland until the Act of 1707. And prior to that act, there was no English kings because uh, all the kings prior to 1066 were Berber kings. And all the Berber kings were the ones who rightfully had the right to operate under the laws of what we call the English government. Okay? The English government. We must comprehend that. All right? So from the 15th to the 16th century, you had division and revolt. Okay? Revision and revolt. All right? I'm not going to go through any more of that since we know the history of the Parliament of England. All right? Okay. So since we know the Parliament of England, we know that Parliament of England was preceded by the Career Regis, which was created by Wittenmont, and Wittenmont was that of government of what we call the Berbers. Okay, and though the Berbers existed from 1065 on backwards. Okay, going back to time immemorial, even back to the 23rd dynasty, even when prior to Rome even coming upon the scene. Okay, and we have incorporated as these same Berbers known as Anglo-Saxon based upon the laws that existed pertaining to their government. Okay, because that's the only way we can exist is the supreme law of the land, which is the government who controls the land based upon its overseeing what we call crown land. Okay, we must comprehend. All right, so let's get to it. All right, let's see where we at. The crown. Okay, matter of fact, we already did Witten, right? We did the Career Regis, all right? Then we said the Parliament of England, okay? We said the Parliament of England. Next thing we have is what we call the Court of the King's Bench. From Witten to the Career Regis to the Parliament of England to what we call the Court of the King's Bench. Let's talk about that real quick. Because this is the line of succession. If everyone understands, please give me a thumbs up in the chat. Court of the King's Bench. The Court of the King's Bench, formerly known as the Court of the King before the King himself, was the court of common law and English legal system, created in the late 12th and 13th century from the Career Regis. Did you hear that? So the Court of the King's Bench was preceded by a Parliament of England, which came from the Career Regis, which came from what we call Witten. Okay, because the Court of the King's Bench goes back to what we call King and his council. Okay, the King and his council. So the Court of the King, formerly known as the Court of the King before the King himself, was a court of common law. Okay, an English legal system created in the 12th to the early 13th century from the Career Regis. The King Bench initially followed the monarch on his travel. This is called an itinerant court, a moving government. We move from over there to over here. Okay, or vice versa. Okay, I don't even think the government was over there. I think it was always been here. Why? Because we know that in 1558, the location of the government of England was now over in what they now call the United Kingdom. All right. So we see that the Court of the King's Bench was composed of the Chancery Court, Exchequer of Pleas, Courts of Common Pleas, all right, as well as other divisions, all right. So it says was a common law English legal system created in the late 12th and early 13th century from the Career Regis, the King's Bench, and this he followed the monarch on his travels. The King's Bench finally joined the Court of Common Pleas and Exchequer of Pleas and Westminster Hall in 1318, making its last travel in 1421. The King's Bench was merged into the High Court of Justice by Supreme Court Judiciary Act of 1873, after which point the King's Bench was a division within the High Court. The King's Bench was staffed by the Chief Justice, now Lord Chief Justice of England, Wales, usually the Puisne of Justices. Okay? Let's go to history. All right, history, because we're not talking about the United Kingdom Parliament. You're talking about the parliament that was established by us. Okay? The origin. Origin, originally the sole court was the Carré Regis on one of the three central administrative bodies, along with the Exchequer and Chancery, from which the Court of Chancery formed. This Carré was the King's Court, composed of those advisors and carriers who followed the king as traveled around the country, i.e., itinerant court. This was not a dedicated court of law, instead a descendant of the Carré Ducas and partly of the Wittenmont. You hear that? In concert with the Carré Regis, Erie Circus, staffed by itinerant judges, dispensed justices throughout the country, operating on a fixed path of certain time. These judges were also members of the Carré and were heard cases on the king's behalf in the lesser Carré Regis. Okay, you hear that? You see the connection. Because of the Carré's travel with the king, there were problems with the administration of justice. For example, if the king left the country for an extended period of time, as Richard I, who spent the vast majority of his reign overseas, did, the Carré followed, making hearings difficult to hold. To remedy this, central bench was established. The Court of Common Pleas, initially split to the Courts of Exchequer Pleas, received official recognition in the Magna Carta so that common pleas could be heard in some fixed place, i.e., territorial courts. All right, circuit courts. Thus, there were two common law courts, the Curia, which followed the king, and the Common Pleas, which sat in Westminster Hall. Okay? All this was established by the Parliament of England, all right, by our ancestors. We must comprehend that. So I'm not going to go too much more on that. Let's move here. Let's look at the New Jersey Provincial Council, okay? Because New Jersey Provincial Council took the position or took place of what we call the King's Bench. The King's Bench resulted from what we call the Parliament of England, which was originated from the Carré Regis, which originated from what we call Witten or Wittemont. All the same government, just under different officials in their official capacity. All right, but upholding the same law. Because, like I said, people change, but positions don't. Okay, people change, but positions don't. And we understand that the crown and the English throne work tandemly. Okay? They work them tandemly. The Jersey Provincial Council means His Majesty's Council for the province of New Jersey was the upper house of New Jersey's legislature, i.e., the House of Lords under the colonial rule until it was replaced by New Jersey Legislative Council under New Jersey's Constitution. Very, very, very important because the authoritative law governing the council was what? The crown. Everyone see that? The crown. Please tell me y'all see that. If you see it, give me the thumbs up. The instructions from Queen Anne to Viscount Cornbury, the first world governor of New Jersey, outlined a fusion of power system which allowed for overlap of executive, legislative, and judicial branch, judicial authority. It provided for a bicameral legislature consisting of a council and a general assembly. On December 6, 1775, Governor William Franklin prorogued the New Jersey legislature until January 3rd, 1776, but it never met again. On May 30th, 1776, William Franklin attempted to convene the legislature, but was met instead with an order by the New Jersey Provincial Council for his arrest. On July 2nd, 1776, the Provincial Council approved New Jersey's Constitution. On August 13th, a new legislature was elected and appointed Provincial Council being succeeded by the elected New Jersey Legislative Council. So they removed the Legislative Council, i.e. the Majesty's Council, i.e. the King's Council, which was known prior to New Jersey Provincial Council as what we call the King's Bench. Prior to that, it was called Parliament of England. Prior to that, it was called the Carré Regis. Prior to that, it was called Wittenmont. Okay? Very, 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 very important that you understand that. Why? Because it was under the authority of what? The crown. Okay? The crown. So why do I say that? Let's go ahead. Crown land. Taking you by the hand, my brothers and sisters. Showing you step by step your illustrious estate. Crown land, also known as royal domain, is a territorial area belonging to the monarch, who personifies the crown. You hear that? Personifies the crown. It is equivalent of a entailed estate and passes with the monarchy being inseparable from it, i.e., what we call what they said statute of mortmain, a dead pledge. Okay, it's an entailed estate and passes with the monarchy being inseparable from it. Today, it's Commonwealth Realms Crown lands considered public land and apart from the monarch's private estate. Yes, inner temple, outer temple, middle temple, and there's another one that was called Clifford's Inn. Okay, Clifford's Inn, where they all broke bread. Okay, in the upper room. Let me just show you that real quick. This is where the Jesus story come from. Clifford's my first name. Excuse me. Clifford's Inn. Brother Victor Thomas stated Court of the King's Bench, 1460, Inner Temple manuscript shows that four courts, Inner Temple Library, Westminster presented 914 and 1950 by Lord Darling. Okay, let's read a little bit about that. Clifford's Inn. Clifford Inn is the name of both the former Inns of Chancery in London and present Mansion Block on the same site. It's located between Fetters Lane and Clifford Inn Passage, which runs between Fleet Street and Chancery Lane in the city of London. The inn was founded in 1344 and refounded in 1668. Okay, 1668. It was dissolved in 1903, and most of its original structure was demolished in 1934. Okay, save for a gateway which survived. It was both the first Inns of Chancery to be founded and the last to be demolished. The mansion blocks was built in the late 1930s. Okay, history of the inn. Okay. Now you stated inner temple, middle temple. Okay, this is where that derives from. I think we'll see that right here in Inns of Chancery. Let's see. Where is that at? Inns Court. All right. The ancient chancery evolved tandem with the ancient courts during the 12th and 13th century. Laws were taught in the city of London primarily by the clergy. Okay, by the clergy. Governance and structure of the Inns of Chancery. All right. Clifford Inn was ruled by its council, which was led by a principal, as well as the principal. The council consisted of 12 barristers, all elected by the inn members who enjoyed certain rights. They could hold chambers whenever they wanted and sat at a separate upper table and dined. You hear this? This is the upper room, my brothers and sisters. This is the upper room. Jesus sitting with his 12 disciples right there. Let me just look up that term, what was it? Inner temple. Because you got inner temple, middle temple, and outer temple. I always like to entertain question brought forth by our brothers and sisters. So I'm going to look that up and show the people. Inner temple. Okay, here we go. This is where all the members of the Bar Association should be getting their license to practice law from here. Okay? Inner Temple. The Honorable Society of the Inner Temple, commonly known as the Inner Temple, is one of the four inns of court in a professional association of barristers and judges to be called to the bar and practice as barristers in England and Wales. A person must belong to one of these inns. Is located in the wider Temple area near the Royal Courts of Justice within the City of London as a liberty and function largely as an independent local government authority. Okay? Very, very important for us to understand that. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, Knights of Templars, founders of the Inner Temple. The history of the Inner Temple begins with the early years of the reign of Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem, when the contingent of Knights Templars in London moved from the old temple in Holborn to a new location on the bank of the River Thames, stretching from Fleet Street to what is now called Essex House. The original temple covered much of what is now known as a part of Chancery Lane, originally New Street, uh, Fletcher Street to what is now Essex House. The original temple covered much of what is now known as the northern part of Chancery Lane, originally called New Street, which the Knights created to provide access to their new buildings. All right. So going back to Clifford's End, they are clearly associated. Okay. They're located in the same area. Located in the same area. Okay. Right there. Chancery Lane and Fleet Street. So great studying, Brother Thomas from the House of Thomas. Well, great connection. All right, let's move forward. All right, so we're on Crown Land. Crown Land is personified by the crown. Okay, Crown Land is personified by the crown. It's an intel estate. All right, and it cannot be separated from the crown, who personifies the estate. Okay, very important for you to understand that. That means all the land, if it's not given to you, i.e., the heirs, it automatically shoots to what we call the crown, i.e., Lord Paramount, as a result of what we call escheatment. Okay? Escheatment. We must comprehend that. So we understand crown land is personified by the monarch who personifies the crown. What is the crown? The crown broadly represents the state in all its aspects with the jurisprudence the Commonwealth realms and their subdivisions, such as crown dependencies, overseas territories, provinces, and states. The term can be used to refer to the office of the monarch or the monarchy as an institution, to the rule of law, or to the function of the executive, i.e., crown and council, the legislative, crown and parliament, and judicial, crown and the bench. All right? Governance and civil service. You must understand that. Please give me a thumbs up if you understand that. The concept of the crown as a corporation so developed first in the Kingdom of England as the separation of the physical crown and property of the kingdom from the personal property of the monarch. Okay? We also go into the concept of the crown. The concept of the crown took form in the feudal system. Though not used this way in all countries that had the system in England, all rights and privileges were ultimately bestowed by the ruler. Land for this instance was granted by the crown to lords in exchange for feudal services, and they in turn granted the land to lesser lords. One exception to this was common socage. Okay, owners of the land held a socis held it subject only to the crown. When such land became ownerless, they are said to extinct, i.e., return direct ownership of the crown, i.e., crown land, because what? The crown personifies the crown land by way of it being the entire estate. And if there are no heirs, then it automatically exceeds as a result of what we call interstate. We must understand. And if it's interstate, then the state don't own it. It becomes bona vacatia. Okay? It becomes bona vacatia, and the royal prerogative by which unowned property, primary unclaimed inheritance, becomes either the property of the crown or the property of the state. Okay? We must understand that. All right? So now let's look at what we call the king, because the king sits on the crown to control crown land. We know New Jersey Provincial Council represents the crown, okay? And we know that the New Jersey Provincial Council was basically what they said the crown was: the executive, legislative, and judicial all packaged up in one, okay? All packaged up in one. And that one is that individual natural person. Okay? That individual natural person. Because it says here, crown is a corporation. So, what is a corporation? So, a corporation soul is a legal entity consisting of a single sole incorporated office occupied by a single sole natural person. A single sole natural person. This would be identified or synonymous with what we call the king. So let's look at the king. The king. This is why the government gonna have a problem with this argument. Because it says the King of England, King Clifford Jefferson, and the Crown of England. We already discussing what those terms mean. The king, i.e., the one who represents the crown, i.e., I, Clifford Jefferson, and the crown of England. Okay? King Clifford Jefferson and the crown of England. You're going to have a hard time answering this based upon how I'm explaining it. The king is the title given to the male monarch in a variety of contexts, i.e., that single person. A king is an absolute monarch if he holds the power of the government without control or the entire sovereignty over a nation. He is a limited monarch if his power is restrained by, i.e., fixed laws. Okay? And he is the absolute when he holds the whole legislative, judicial, executive power, of which the legislative or judicial power or both are vested in other people by the king. Okay? We must make that connection. Okay? None of this is strange. All right? None of this is strange. Okay? When we talk about the kings, we're talking about the kings of England, not kings of any other nation, but the kings of England. All right? The term king may also refer to a king's consort. All right? Sometimes given to the husband or queen regnant by the title prince consort or more, which are more common. Okay? The English term king is derived from the Anglo-Saxon "sing," which is term derived from the Common Germanic "kundigas." The Common Germanic term was borrowed in Estonia and Finnish as early times, surviving in those languages as "kundigas." It is a derivation of the term "kujum," which means kin, by the Inga suffix. The literal meaning is that the scion of the noble kin, or perhaps son of a descendant of one of the noble birth. Okay? Clifford Jefferson. Jefferson, son is a prefix belonging to the family of Godfrey, fifth count of Andrew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Hold that thought. History. The English word is a Germanic origin. That's what they want you to think, but it's not. Refers to Germanic kingship in the pre-Christian period of types of tribal kinship. The monarchies of Europe in the Christian Middle Ages derived their claims from Christianization. We know the Christianization on the Anglo-Saxon came by way of the Gregorian mission by Pope Gregory I in 597. Prior to that, we had our own concept of Christianity, which means those who are Christ-like. Okay? All right? The monarchs of Europe in Christian Middle Ages derived their claims from Christianization and the divine rights of kings, partially influenced by the notion of sacred kinship inherited or soon to be inherited from Germanic antiquity. The early medieval kings began with the fragmentation of the former Western Roman Empire into barbarian kingdoms. In Western Europe, the kingdom of Franks developed into the Carolingian Empire by the 8th century, and then the kingdom of Anglo-Saxon England was unified into the kingdom of England by the 10th century. So everybody got their interpretation of their kings. All right, the identity of their kings. We know that all the Carolingian, Frankish descendants are descended down from William the Conqueror. Okay, all the kings from the kingdom of England, i.e., the kings of Plantagenet or the kings of Wessex, are descended down from the ancient Berbers. Okay, because we didn't have an English king until William the Conqueror invaded the land called England. We must understand that. Whether you want to call him the king, whether you want to call him the monarch, okay, they all mean the same. They are a representation of the crown who protects the crown land. So let's look at the word monarch or monarchy. Nothing spooky. A monarchy is a form of government in which a person, the monarch, reigns as head of state for the life or till abdication. Until abdication. The extent of the authority of the monarch may vary from restricted and large symbolic constitutional monarchy to fully autocratic absolute monarchy. It may have representational, executive, legislative, and judicial functions. Okay? Very, very important. Because we're talking about the king, i.e., who represents the crown, i.e., the monarchy. Okay? We must comprehend that. And the concept of it differs. Okay? The etymology of the word. The word monarch comes from or soon to come from an ancient Greek word, monarchus, derived from the word one, single, okay? Or ruler or chief or to rule. It refers to a single, at least nominally absolute ruler, one. In current use, the word monarchy usually refers to a traditional system of hereditary rule, as elective monarchy are quite rare. So elective, all right? Elective, all right? When we did it, it was based upon the legislator chose who would be the monarchy, based upon agnatic traditions, salic, or what we call primogeniture. Okay, very important. Characteristics of the role. Monarchies are associated with the hereditary reign in which monarchies reigns for life, and the responsibility and power of the position passes to their child or another member of their family when they die, i.e., this is called demise. Most monarchs, both historically and in the modern day, have been born and brought up within a royal family, okay? The center of the royal house and court. Growing up in a royal family called a dynasty when it continued for several generations, future monarchs are often trained for their expected future responsibility as monarchs, okay? As monarchs. Different systems of hereditary succession have been used, such as proximity of blood, primogeniture, and agnatic seniority through Salic law. While most monarchs in history have been male, many female monarchies also have reigned. The term queen regent refers to a ruling monarch, while queen consort refers to the wife of a reigning king. Rules may be hereditary in practice without being considered a monarchy. There have been some family dictatorship and also political families in many democracies. Okay? Democratics, very important. Okay. Role of a monarch. Monarchy, especially absolute monarchy, is sometimes linked to religious aspects. Many monarchs, one, claim the right to rule by the will of a deity, divine rights of kings, mandate of heaven, or a special connection to a deity or a sacred king, or even purported to be divine kings or incarnations of deities themselves, imperial cult. Many European monarchs have been styled fidelis defensor, defender of the faith. Some hold official positions related to the state religion or established church. We call it Vicar of Christ. Vicar of Christ. We must understand this, my brothers and sisters. We must understand this. There's more on the topic, but I'm looking for something, so I'm not going to carry on right here. I think we can find it in the king. Let's go back to king. That's it in the crown. It might be here. Okay, yeah, it's the crown. We know the crown means the king means the monarch. Same thing. Right here. Very important. And the Kingdom of England merged with those of Scotland and Ireland. The concept extended into a legal lexicon of the United Kingdom and its dependencies and overseas territories, and eventually all of the independent Commonwealth. There are thus now many distinct crowns as a legal concept worn by or many different offices of the monarchy occupied by one person as sovereign, i.e., supreme monarchy of each country. However, the crown can also mean pan-national institutions shared by all 15 Commonwealth realms. Key point. In each Commonwealth realm, the term the crown at its broadest now means the government of the polity known as the state, while the sovereign in all realms is the living embodiment of the state. Did you hear that, y'all? It is the living embodiment of the state. We already know what crown land is, and we know that the crown is personified by the king who protects intel estates. Okay? We'll look at that in a second. So in each Commonwealth realm, the term crown as its broadest now means the government or the polity known as a state, while the sovereign in all realms is the living embodiment of the state or symbolic personification of the crown. Did y'all hear that? What does it mean to personify? Personification is the representation of a thing or abstraction as a person. It is, in other words, considered an embodiment of or an incarnation. What is embodiment? A metaphor and figure or speech that, for rhetorical effects, directly refers for one thing by mentioning another. It may provide clarity or identify hidden similarities between two different ideas. Okay, so personification based upon your comprehension, is the representation of a thing or abstraction as a person. It is, in other words, considered an embodiment or incarnation. Did you hear that? An incarnation. So if that's the case, let's go back to crown land. Crown land. Back to that word. Personification. Personify. Incarnate. You can look at it from the abstract or the concrete. You want to make it spooky, fine. Want to make it concrete? You better listen to me. Crown land, also known as Rose Domain, is a territory area belonging to the monarch who what? Personifies the crown. It is the equivalent of a entail estate. What is entail? In English common law, fee-tail estate is a form of trust established by deed or settlement that restricts the sale of inheritance of a estate in real property and prevents the property from being sold, divided by will, or otherwise alienated by the tenant in possession. Did you hear that? It can't get no clearer than that, my brothers and sisters. Okay? It can't get no clearer than that. So as a result of that, we must understand that the crown, okay, that was here in 1702, okay, to 1706 was the same crown known by Wittenmont, Carew Regis, Parliament of England, the King's Bench, now known as New Jersey Provincial Council because it represents the King's Council, okay, which is indefinite. Don't care what you call it, it's indefinite, okay? We must comprehend these facts. And the last ruling royal governor was who? William Franklin before they went rogue. Why is this important? Let's read about it. See, they gambling, okay? They like to gamble, okay? Right? They like to gamble. They like to put stakes on things, okay? That's what it's all about. Elia exita est, okay? The die is cast is a variation of Latin phrase etica elia est, which is attributed to Septimius to Julius Caesar. We know New Jersey was called Nova Caesarea on the 10th of January 49 BC as led to his army across Rubicon. This phrase was also used by King George III. Okay? The die must cast. What is a die? A small throwing object, such as dice. Okay? All right? So when we look at the term the die to cast, they meaning that they're rolling the dice on the event that has undertaken by them concerning their breaking away from the crown, which we know is represented by the king, which goes all the way back to the king's government, no matter what government you call it, whether it was Witten, Carew Regis, English Parliament, King's Bench, now called New Jersey Provincial Council, because there's a fusional government between all parts of the King's government, which is now based upon the new government. There's a separation of powers. Okay. All right. But yet they violated the separation of powers, even in their act to separate the powers. Let's see it. Okay. The die is cast. Done, and you and all yours have done what you ought not to have done. Let me entreat you as a friend, and as you regard your reputation and the appropriation of your American brethren, to reform and turn away from your evil ways. This is from William Franklin to the General Assembly. Okay? Turn from your evil ways. For believe me, you will not for your daunting performances be closeted by your sovereign, nor be made a privy council, nor will neither be made a knight of the garter, or knight of the banner, nor a knight of the bath, neither will you be made even one of the poor knights of Windsor. You will not receive the thanks of the House of Lords or Commons, nor if I had my will, should you get what you are seeking after the expect either place or pension. Okay? Very important. There was a meeting of lawyers in Perth Amboy on September 19, 1765, which resulted in an agreement by the attorneys not to use a stamp or stamp paper in their legal transaction, i.e., the Stamp Act. They even reference the Quran here as well. Governor William Franklin to the General Assembly. Votes and proceedings. January 11th, February 13th, 1775. Burlington, 1775, which was one of the territories that the crown resided, whether it was Perth Amboy or Burlington. The current imperial crisis weighed especially heavily upon the shoulders of Governor William Franklin, causing it that he lacked the authority and ability to stem the tides of resistance. He looked for a way to counter the Popular Front. Extra-legal organizations and activities had proliferated in part because the legislature, which had largely directed the protest movement in the past and had not set March 1774, yet to cause the assembly what was to risk escalating the problem by means of a legislative endorsement of the congressional program. Deciding to gamble, i.e., what is this? The die is cast. Decided to gamble. Franklin summoned the General Assembly in January 1775. His opening message to the Solons revealed his strategy by stressing by stressing the responsibilities of the representatives and the states at hand. He hoped to dissuade the Assembly from sanctioning the actions of the Continental Congress. In particular, he endeavored to break the united front of opposing by inducing the lower house to send a separate remonstrance to the king instead of acquiescing in the congressional petition. He realized neither objective. Gentlemen in council and gentlemen of the assembly. It would argue not only a great want of duty to his majesty, but of regards to the good people of this province, where I, on this occasion, to pass over in silence the late alarming transactions in this and the neighboring colonies, or not endeavor to prevail on you to exert yourselves in preventing those mischiefs in this country, which without your timely interposition will in all probability be the consequences. It is not for me to decide on the particular merits of the dispute between Great Britain and her colonies, nor do I mean to censure those who conceive themselves aggrieved for aiming at the redress of their grievances. It is the duty they owe, themselves, their country, and their posterity. All that I would wish to guard you against is the giving in countenance or encouragement to that destructive mode of proceedings which has been unhappily adopted in part by some of the inhabitants of this colony. It has been carried so far in others as totally to subvert their former constitution. It has already struck at the authority of one of the branches of the legislature in a particular manner. And if you gentlemen of the assembly should give your approbation to transaction of this nature, You will do as much as lies in your powers to destroy the form of government to which you are an important part, in which it is your duty by all lawful measures to preserve. To you, your constituents have entrusted a particular guardianship of their rights and privileges. You are their legal representative, and you cannot, without a manifest breach of your trust, suffer any body of men in this or any other provinces to usurp and exercise any of the powers vested in you by the Constitution. It behooves you, particularly who must be constitutionally supposed to speak the sense of the people at large, to be extremely cautious and consented to any act whereby you may engage them to parties in, and make them answerable for the measures which may have a tendency to involve them in the difficulties far greater than those they aim to avoid. Besides, there is no gentleman the least necessity. Consequently, there will not be at least excuses for your running any such risk on the present occasion. If you are really disposed to represent the king, if you are really disposed to represent the king and any conveniences you conceive yourself to lie under, or to make any proposition of the present state of America, I can assure you from the best authorities that such representation or propositions will be properly attended to, and certainly have greater weight coming from each colony in its separate capacity than in a channel, of the propriety and legality of which there may be much doubt. There may be much doubt. You have now pointed out to you, gentlemen, two roads, one evidently leading to peace, happiness, and restoration of the public tranquility, the other inviolability conducting you to anarchy, misery, and all horrors of a civil war. Okay? Your wisdom, your prudence, and your regard for the true interests of the people will be best known when you have shewn to which road you have given preference. If to the former, you will probably afford satisfaction to the moderate, the sober, and the discreet part of your constituents. If to the latter, you will perhaps for a time give pleasure to the warm, the rash, and the inconsiderate among them, who I would willingly hope violate as a temper of the present time, are not even now the majority. But it may be well for you to remember, should any calamity hereafter befall them from your compliance with their inclination, instead of pursuing as you ought the dictates of your own judgment, that the consequences of their not returning to a proper sense of their conduct may prove deservedly fatal to yourselves. I should say no more at present on this disagreeable subject, but only to repeat an observation I made to the former assembly on a similar occasion. Every breach of the Constitution, whether it proceeds from the crown or the people, is in effect equally destructive to the rights of both. I repeat, every breach of the Constitution, whether it proceeds from the crown or the people, is in effect equally destructive to the rights of both. It is the duty, therefore, of those who are entrusted with government to be equally careful in guarding against encroachments from one as to the other. But is to say one of the wisest men, i.e., Witten, a most infallible symptom of the dangerous state of liberty, when the chief men of a free country show a greater regard to popularity than their own judgment. William Franklin. Come on, you can't get no more clear than that, my brothers and sisters. You can't get no clearer than that. All right, let's move forward. United States versus one Kimmel Art. Smith versus Alabama. United States versus Juan Kimar. Smith versus Alabama, Mr. Justice Matthews delivered the judgment of the court, stated that there is no common law of the United States in the sense of a natural customary law distinct from the common law of England, as adopted by the several states, each for itself apply as its local law, and subject to such alteration as may be provided by its own statutes. There is, however, one clear exception to the statement that there is no national common law. The interpretation of the Constitution of the United States is necessarily influenced by the fact that its provisions are framed in the language of the English common law and ought to be read in light of its history. You hear that? Do y'all hear that? Two, the fundamental principles of the common law with regards to English nationality was birth within the allegiance, also called legality, or obedience, faith, or power of the king. The principles embrace all persons born within the king's allegiance and subject to his protection. Such allegiance and protection were mutual, as expressed in the maximum protectio trahit subjectionem et subjectio protectionem, and were not restricted to natural-born subjects and naturalized subjects, or to those who had taken an oath of allegiance. You hear that? But were predicable of aliens in ably so long as they were within the kingdom. Children born in England of such aliens were within therefore natural born subjects, but the children born within the realm of a foreign ambassador or the children of alien enemies born during or within the hostile occupation or a part of the king's dominion were not natural born subjects because not born within the allegiance or the obedience or the power, or as would say in this day, within the jurisdiction of the king. Do y'all hear that, brothers and sisters? This fundamental principle with these qualifications or explanations of it was clearly though pardon so. These oh, pardon so. These fundamental principles with these qualifications and explanations was clearly, though quantumly stated in the leading case known as Calvin's case. Okay, this is the status for those who became citizenship by way of the House of Tudors. Okay, through what we call the religious Elizabeth religious settlement. Okay, all right, that's not according to who the English heirs are. All right, we're reading how our citizenship is supposed to be determined, and that's in light of the English common law. Okay. The English authorities ever since are to the like effect. Once again, English authorities ever since are to like effect. Case law to support that. And Uday versus Uday, the point decided was one of the inheritance depending upon the questions whether the domicile of the father was in England or in Scotland. He being in either alternative a British subject, Lord Chancellor Hartley said, the question of naturalization and of allegiance is distinct from that of domicile. Lord Westbury, in the past, to rely on the Council for the United States, began by saying, the law of England in almost all civilized countries ascribed to each individual at his birth two distinct legal statuses or conditions. One by virtue of which he becomes the subject of some particular country, binding him by the tie of natural allegiance, and by which may be called his political status, another by virtue of which he has ascribed to him the character of a citizen of some particular country, and as such is possessed of certain municipal rights and subject to certain obligation, which latter character is the civil status or condition of the individual and may be quite different from his political status. You hear that, brothers and sisters? Y'all better wake up. And then, while maintaining the civil status, is universally governed by the single principles of domicile, i.e., residency. The criterion established by international law for the purpose of determining civil status and the basis on which the personal rights of the party, that is to say, the law which determines his majority or minority, his marriage, succession, testacy, or intestacy. Okay? Testacy or intestacy. That deals with you having the right to be an heir. He yet distinctly recognized that a man's political status, his country, patriarch, and his nationality, that is, natural allegiance, may depend on different laws in different countries. So, status under the common law is defined as the legal relationship based upon the behavior and actions that establishes their legal status. Okay, we must comprehend that. He evidently used the word citizen not equivalent to subject, but rather to inhabitant, and had not thought of the impeaching the establishment rule that all persons born under dominion are natural born subjects. Let's read a little bit more about this. Lord Chief Justice Cockburn, in the same year revealing the whole matter, stated, by the common law of England, every person born within the dominion of the crown, no matter whether of English or of foreign parents, and in the latter case, i.e., of foreign parents, whether the parents were settled or merely temporarily sojourning in the country, was an English subject, save only the children of foreign ambassadors who were expected because of the fathers carried their own nationality with them, or the children born of foreigners during the hostile occupation of any part of the territories of England. No effect appears to have been given to the descent or source of a nationality. Y'all better listen. The exceptions aforementioned by Mr. Dicey are only two. Any person who, his father being an alien enemy, is born in part of a British dominion, which at the time such person was born in a hostile occupation is an alien. Two, any person whose father being an alien is at the time of such person's birth an ambassador or other diplomatic agent accredited by the crown by the sovereign of a foreign state is though born within the British domain a alien. Okay? We're talking about those under the Settlement Act of Elizabeth I. He asked, exceptional. Now I don't want to read that. Let me go a little further. It thus clearly appears that by the law of England for the last 3 centuries, beginning before the settlement of this country and continuing to the present day, aliens, while residing in the dominion possessed by the crown of England, were within the allegiance and the obedience, the faith or loyalty, and the protection, the power, and the jurisdiction of the English sovereign. And therefore, every child born in England of alien parents was a natural born subject, unless child or ambassador or other diplomatic agents of a foreign state or alien enemy in hostile occupation of the place where the children was born. Two, the same rule two, any person whose father being I read that already. Three, the same rule was enforced in all English colonies upon this continent down to the time of the Declaration of Independence and the United States afterward and continued to prevail under the Constitution as originally established. You hear that? The same rules enforced in all English colonies upon this continent down to the time of the Declaration of Independence in the United States afterward and continue to prevail under the Constitution as originally established. Did you hear that, my brothers and sisters? Okay? Did you hear that? Let's go here. Right here. both in England and the United States. Indeed, statutes have been passed at various times enacted that certain issues born abroad of English subjects or of American citizens, respectively, should inherit to some extent at least the rights of their parents. But those statutes apply only to cases coming within their purport. They have never been considered in either country as affecting the citizenship of a person born within its dominion. So it must be within their purport in regards to it being heard based upon your status under the English common law. Why? Because it said here, the earliest statutes were passed in the reign of who? Edward III, son of Edward II, son of Edward I, son of Henry III, son of John, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey the fifth, kind of man, Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. The earliest statute was passed in the reign of Edward III in the Robes of Parliament of Edward III. It stated that before these times, there had been great doubt and difficulty among the lords of this realm and the commons, as well men of the law as others, whether children who are born in part beyond the sea ought to bear inheritance after the death of their ancestors in England, because no certain laws had been therefore ordained, meaning the Tory rights, contrast to referendum rights. And by the king's lords and commons, it was unanimously agreed that there was no manner of doubt that the children of our Lord, the King, whether they were born on this side of the sea or beyond the sea, should bear the inheritance of their ancestors in regard to other children, and was agreed in this parliament that they should inherit whatever they might be born in the service of the king. Did y'all hear that, my brothers and sisters? Did you hear that? But because Parliament was about to depart and the business demanded great advisement and good deliberation, how it should be best and most shortly done, the making of the statutes was put off to the next Parliament by reason, apparently, of the prevalence of the plague in England, i.e., they're talking about the Black Plague. No act upon the subject was passed until Edward III, when Parliament passed an act, a statute for those born in parts beyond the sea, by which, after reciting that some people be in doubt if the children born in the parts beyond the sea out of the legions of England should be able to demand any inheritance within the same legions or not, whereof a petition was put forth in the Parliament of Edward III, and as not at the same time wholly assented, it was agreed and affirmed. Listen, y'all, that the laws of the Crown of England is and always has been such that the children of the kings of England, and whatever part they be born in England or elsewhere, be able or ought to bear the inheritance after the death of their ancestors. Did you hear that? This is what I preserved for you. Okay? With that, we go to United States versus Lee. Supreme Court case 1882 in closing. In all cases where the title to property came into controversy between the crown and a subject, whether held in right of the person who was the king or as a representative of the nation, the petitioner of right presented a judicial remedy, a remedy which the court, on full examination in case which required it, held it to be practical and efficient. There has been therefore no necessity, you hear that? That word necessity, for suing the officer or servants of the king who held possession of such property when the issue could be made with the king himself as a defendant or a plaintiff. Okay? Another reason for much greater weight is found in the vast differences in the essential character of the two governments as regard to the source and the depositories of the power. Y'all better listen. Notwithstanding the progress which has been made since the days of the Stuarts in stripping the crown of its power and prerogatives, it remains true today that the monarch is looked upon with too much reverence to be subject to the demands of the law as ordinary persons are, and the king-loving nation will be shocked at the spectacle of their queen being turned out of her pleasure, guarded by a writ of ejectment against the gardener. The crown remains the fountain of honor and the surrounding which gives dignity and majesty to its possessor. are cherished and enforced all the more strictly because of the loss of the real power in the government. It is not to be expected, therefore, that the court will permit their process to disturb the possession of the crown by acting on its officers or agents. Did you hear that, my brothers and sisters? Okay? Did you hear that? That goes back to New Jersey Provincial Council. Let's look at that in closing. New Jersey Provincial Council, all right, which went by many other names. The most sacred name is Wittenmont, okay, but now it's under New Jersey Provincial Council, which was a fusion of the government of the King's government, the King's legislative power, the King's judicial power, as well as the King's executive power, under the crown, okay? We must comprehend that, all right? From 1702 to 1776, which brings us to New Jersey's Constitution. The 1947 Constitution is not what we want to go look at. We want to look at the 1776 Constitution. Everybody give me a thumbs up if you're still awoke, if you like what you're hearing. So from 1776, from 1702 to 1776, the crown government of the Kingdom of England was in place. The Union of the Crowns didn't come until 1707. So it wasn't until 1707 that the Scottish kings started acting under the Kingdom of Scotland. But prior to that, it was the Kingdom of England operating under de facto monarch. All right. And we know King James and every king or queen that descended underneath them were de facto in nature as well. Okay. So it says here on July 2nd, 1776, New Jersey became the fourth American colony to adopt a constitution declaring independence from Great Britain. It was composed in 5 days, although the delegates considered it a temporary charter and remained a state constitution for 68 years. So I mean that the Constitution of 1776 was supposed to be a temporary charter or a provisionary charter, but it remained in effect for 68 years. Okay? For 68 years. If you add 1776 to 68, it would be 1844. So that means from 1776 to 1844, they were operating under what? The common law of England, because it continued, as well as the oath of affirmation to continue the common law of England until a reconciliation of the crown. Okay? Because it's right here. That every person who should be elected as aforesaid to be a member of the Legislative Council or the House of Assembly, as they established in New Jersey Provincial Council in 1702, shall previous to his taking the seat of Council Assembly take the following oath of allegiance, or i.e., oath of affirmation, that you solemnly declare that the member of that council, whether it be the House of upper house or lower house, the Lord Council or the General Assembly, that any member of that council of the colony of New Jersey will not submit to any law, vote, or proceeding which shall appear to be injurious to the public welfare of the said colony, nor that which establishes the election of members of the Legislative Council and Assembly, and shall be annual, nor that part of the 22nd section in said charter respecting the trial by jury under the common law should be repealed, as well as stated provided always, down here at the second paragraph, that it's the true intent and meaning of this Congress that if the reconciliation with Great Britain of these colonies should take place, and that the latter be again taken under the protection of the government of the Crown. We already know what the government of the Crown, excluding the government of Great Britain and the Scottish Crown, that the charter, I that constitution that they now have, will be considered null and void. We know that based upon that the dice that was rolled by the founding fathers, they chose to go away from the crown when William Franklin warned them about that. Okay, all right, he warned them about that. So we see that the crown existed from 1776 to 1844, but yet in 1844 the power of the crown was transferred. How we know that? Let's see. 1844. So from 1702 to 1776, the crown was already in effect. It was a fusional government, okay? Now we see in 1844, 68 years later, New Jersey's second constitution shifted the government power, which had been vested disproportionately in the legislative government in 1776, as well as 1702, under the state's first charter. Now they have transferred the power of that legislative branch under the state's first charter to the executive branch, in addition to direct elections to be now administered under what they call the governor. So now the people have been allowed to elect the governor under the 1844 Constitution, contrast to it being elected by the legislator and the 1776 Constitution. Okay, so that's a violation of separation of powers. Okay, we must understand that. All right, we must understand that. Why am I saying that? Okay, why am I saying that? Let's see. If you go back to the 1776 Constitution under the New Jersey Provincial Council, which is their first charter. Let's see the positions of how they were deemed to act as officers under the crown, under their gubernatorial elections. Okay, let's look at the gubernatorial elections in 1776 and then the gubernatorial elections in 1844 and 1946. Okay, very, very important. Under the crown, the Provincial Council consists of 12 members appointed by and serving at the pledges of the British Crown, not the English Crown, with the exception of the resignation of those being removed for cause. Councils often serve for life. Okay? A quorum could be established by 3 or more councilors. Okay? When we say council, we're talking about the King's councilors, whether they were councilors under New Jersey provincial councils, whether they were council of the King's Bench, whether they were council under the Parliament of England, whether they were council of the Carré Regis, whether they were council of Witton. In this case, we're talking about Witton, because we know Witton goes back to the council of the Anglo-Saxon burghers. Okay? So 3 or more councils could be considered a quorum. Okay? What are the powers? As described from 1702 to 1776, before it was transferred 68 years later in 1844 to the executive branch. All right? The Provincial Council was the upper house of the colonial legislature, and as such was a predecessor to the modern New Jersey Senate, i.e. the upper house. Laws enacted were to be styled as by the governor, council, and assembly, one approved by both houses and signed by the governor laws, and were transmitted to London to be signed by who? The governor, or disallowed by who? To be signed by who? The crown, or disallowed by who? The crown. Not the governor, not the secretary of state, not the president, not the attorney general, but the crown. Gubernatorial appointments, including judges, justices of the peace, and sheriffs, were to be made within the advice and consent of the council, who reported where? To the crown. We must understand that. This was how elections were done by the legislator under New Jersey legislative, under the New Jersey Provincial Council, which was the upper house. We must comprehend that. But somehow that changed in 1844 because you took that power of the legislator and put it and move it to what we call the executive branch, to what we call the 1844 gubernational, i.e., the election of governors. Let's look at it. All right. I do not play around. 1844 gubernational. 1844 New Jersey gubernatorial election held October 1844 was the election that happened when they transferred the power of the legislature to the executive branch. Okay, all that's with your founding fathers. Okay, then you have the 1947, 19 what was it? 1947 gubernatorial. Let me go here. This was Alfred Driscoll. Okay, and Rutgers University. Right. 1947 gubernatorial. United States gubernatorial elections were held in 1947. Three states, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi, hold their gubernatorial election in odds of a number of years, every 4 years preceding for the state for United States presidential election. Let me go to New Jersey, part and cell. New Jersey. Let's see if I can find that. Well, we know there were conventions, 1947 and 1844. All right, I'm not going to pull that up. All right, so with that in mind, okay, we must understand, my brothers and sisters, all right, knowing that the government is the one who makes the laws. And we understand that the government, prior to the founding fathers coming on the scene, was the government of the Crown of England, okay? Going by many names. The last known name was New Jersey Provincial Council, okay? New Jersey Provincial Council, okay? And I say that to say, let me come here and close it. Chapter 21. and closing. Chapter 21, public records and closing. Okay. It says necessity for recording. A deed or mortgage may not be effective as far as, let me see if I can load it up for you. Necessity for recording. A deed or mortgage may not be effective as far as later purchaser are concerned, unless a document has been recorded. Thus, the public record should reveal the conditions of the title, and a purchaser should be able to rely on a search of such public record from a practical point of view. The Recording Act and gives priority to those interests that are recorded first. Okay, I don't know what's wrong. I'm trying to deal with the size, but it won't allow me to do it. Bear 1 second. All written instruments affecting the title to real property may be recorded in the public record of the county in which the real estate is located, which then gives constructive notice to the world of their existence. Did everybody hear that? So when you file for the public record a constructive notice, it gives notice to the world. Okay? It gives notice to the world. Let's go to the next page. Notice, right? Relying on the maximum caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. The court charged a prospective real estate buyer or mortgage lender with the responsibility of inspecting the property and searching the public record to ascertain the interests of the other parties. Constructive notice assumes that the information is available, therefore the buyer or lender is responsible for learning it. Constructive notices, or what buyers could find out, is distinguished from actual notice, or what the person actually knows. After the individual has searched the public record and inspected the property, he or she had actual notice or knowledge that the information learned. Okay? Very important. And an individual is said to have actual notice of any information on which he or she has direct knowledge. In New Jersey, it is the duty of the purchaser to investigate the title of property to be conveyed. Okay? Very, very, very important. It says right here, evidence of a title. Okay? There's 4. Abstract of title, title insurance, towing certificate, or certificate of title. The latter three, the former 3 outside certificate of title is only a title of how you acquired possession. Okay, it doesn't prove you actually own it. It's not proof of ownership. How we know it? It says here, a deed is not proof of a title. It proves that the grantor transferred the property, but not prove that the grantor had prove that the grantor it doesn't prove that the grantor had a real title or a good title. Basically, that's what it says. Right? Also, I want to look at this before we close out. All right. So a chain of title, a deed is not a clear chain of title. All right. A deed is not a clear chain of title. Once again, we come here. Now I can't make this smaller. Chapter 20. Chapter 20. Transfer of title. Once again, chapter 20, transfer of title. Okay. I'm going to just let you see it. I'm going to read it verbatim what it says. It says right here, my brothers and sisters, involuntary. Title to property can be transferred by involuntary alienation. That means without the owner's consent. Such transfer is usually carried out by operation of law, ranging from the government condemnation of land for public use for the sale of property to satisfy the liquid taxes or mortgages. When a person dies interstate and leaves no heirs, the title to his or her real estate passes to the state by way of its treatment. Okay? By way of its treatment. And this is another example. Right? Person dies, it's interstate. It automatically streets to the state because the crown is not there. Okay, when the crowns come back, that means that the state can't take the property for public use because the state has no eminent domain power because the eminent domain power resulted from what they call adverse possession or prescription of sovereignty, which is the easement, all right, that the public take private property for public use, which is adverse possession due foreclosure, okay? Through foreclosure, okay, which is hostile. Open notorious continue to hostile and adverse use for another property for a prescriptive period. This is called squatting rights, okay? So we understand that as a result of me, the king, representing the crown, i.e. the monarchy, I have the right to the exceeding power of the estate as a result of interstate by you as heirs no longer existing as a result of you being reclassified as citizens by way of the naturalization processes that were created through acts of legislation that were unconstitutional. Okay? Unconstitutional. So, in closing, constructive notice has been given. And what is constructive notice? Constructive notice is a legal fiction that signifies a person or entity should have known as a reasonable person would have of a legal action taken or to be taken, even if they have no actual knowledge of it. Okay? Overview of it deals with the doctrine and generally construed with regard to legal notices that are published, either by posting them at a designated place in a courthouse or publish them in a newspaper designated for legal notices. What is newspaper notices? Let's look at that before we close out. Newspaper of record. A newspaper of record is a major national newspaper with a large circulation with editorial and news gathering functions which are considered authoritative and independent. They are thus newspapers of record by reputation and include some of the oldest and most widely respected newspapers in the world. The number of trends of newspapers of record of reputation is related to the state of press freedom and political freedom in this country. Very important because through our constructive notice in the newspaper, we have show constructive possessions versus actual possessions. All right. We have show constructive possessions contrast to actual possessions because right now it's in the hands of through adverse possessions that were created by the state. Okay. That were created by the state. So constructive possession is defined as constructive possession is a legal fiction to describe a situation in which the individual has actual control over a chattel or real property without actual having physical control of the same at law. A person with constructive possession stands in the same legal possession as someone with actual possessions. How we know that? We come to our closing exhibit. We have constructive possessions based upon our constructive notice in the newspaper as well as on the public record. Okay? We have satisfied both. Let's prove it. Ad number 00048927775. One date, 9th, 3rd, 2021. By the King, a royal proclamation. This is constructive notice to declare that the Jura Kingdom of England from 927 to 1707 in a state of necessity or emergency. Hear ye, King Clifford Jefferson, Godfrey ascended and descended from the house of Plantagenet, the heirs of John, son of Henry the son of Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth count of Anjou, going back to what we call time immemorial, 1189. Parliament of England, my brothers and sisters, to all local governments such as villages, boroughs, townships, municipalities, counties, including but not limited to their agencies, departments, offices, including but not limited to their office agencies, and signees, the English Church of England, now known as the Third Temple English Church of England, through its members as officers have lawfully convened in quorum. It only takes 3, as it said on the Church Provincial Council. We took that quorum January 14, 2020, deriving our authority from the Great Charter of the Magna Carta pursuant to Judge Statute 61-28 via Virginia Statute 1, I can't say that too clear, saving rights of the Charter of Great Britain, safe from repeal, and 61-28 is an act by Great Britain to incorporate trustees of religious society, approved April 9th, 1000, not 1,875, which is saved from repeal. And this act of legislation was an act to incorporate trustees for a religious society for property held in corporations placed thereof. So the corporation placed thereof has the property that belongs to the religious corporation, i.e., they hold it by way of what we call abandoned vacatina. Okay, as you can see here, this is filed for the constructive notice based upon um, newspaper notice, all right, based upon our constructive possessions, as well as the constructive possession that's filed for the public record. Okay. Right here. New Jersey Department of Treasury, Division of Revenue Enterprise Services. The Third Temple English Church, King Successors Corporation, New Jersey, a nonprofit corporation. So this is the record, brothers and sisters. This is the record. We also have our tax ID. Okay. We don't have to pay taxes. We can collect taxes. Okay? We can collect taxes from the state. All right? We can collect taxes from the state because they're the ones who supposed to be paying the debt, not us. The Crown collects all debt. And last but not least, our certificate of incorporation. Article 2. Corporation sole royal peculiar the Crown. Okay? You know what that means, so I ain't got to read it. All right? I don't have to read it. This is our booking and page number right here. Right here. So with that, let me make sure I covered everything. So with that, I think I covered everything. I just want each and every person at the sound of my voice to understand how important it is to understand the king, the position of the king who represents the monarch, who authorized by sitting in the position as the monarch or king, who operates the throne, which is a single office of a single natural person who sits in position as the king of England on the throne. Okay, and is responsible as Prince Patriarch, the father of the nation. Okay, and his obligation is to make sure that he preserves the intel estate for all of you who are heirs from the Kingdom of England as established by United States versus One Kingdom Ark, and that you are allowed to inherit the state or estate inland based upon the English overseas possessions under jury title of what we call the king. Okay, so with that, please pass this information around, as well as donate, subscribe, as well as any other form of way of getting this information out to the public. Please use it at your discretion. Okay. Once again, this lesson is for all my brothers and sisters to understand how important it is to show your allegiance and show and pray that when the time comes, that the crown have you in mind. Okay, and with that, I'll open the floor for questions if there are some. If not, then forever hold your peace. So with that, I digress on the lecture aspect of it and move for questions on the floor. Any questions? Any questions? Once again, like, share, subscribe. Any donations, Free and common soakers, please send them to the Third New England Church of England or $ Clifford Jefferson L. All right. Thank you for your donation, your gifts, your patronage is well received. Okay, it's well received. All right. If you haven't watched this lesson, then you need to watch it again. Yeah, you should do that, Brother McGowan from the House of McGowan. Watch this lesson again. Okay. Hold on for a minute. Watch this lesson again. It's going to be paramount in lieu of you connected the dots. All right. We're still functioning under the same government. It's just going by many different names. Okay. Many different names. So with that, I'm going to leave you as I greeted you. And as always, in peace and love. Peace, my brothers and sisters. Archbishop, make sure you post that the thumbnail to fit this video. All right. Everybody have a blessed holiday.